Intro to camping, or into the wild of camping panel. My name's Hassa. Have been in the outdoors for well over 15 years or more, camping, hiking, etc. I am currently working as a forest ranger and wildland firefighter, so it's part of my job also being outside. And I feel like more people should go out and enjoy the outdoors, so that's what this panel is all about. So we are going to go over things like, what do you even pack? How do you find a camping area? What do you bring? What do you eat? What do you do about bugs? How many of you have been camping before? Perfect. Tent camping? Cowboy camping? Or long-term backpacking? All right, got a few. Got a whole range. Perfect. So I love questions. I love comments. So raise a hand. I have little prizes for participation, so always welcome for that. Let's see here. So one of the big things is your 10 essentials. You need it for camping, hiking, whatever. You always want to be safe when going outdoors, and that's mostly what people are looking for. So anyone have an idea of what one of those 10 essentials might be?
Bottled water.
Water, perfect. So we'll start with, if I don't knock this over. All right, we got water. You get a sticker. I can drop.
Nice.
All right. What's another one?
Snacks.
Food. Yes.
You gotta.
Food. You gotta have food.
Yeah.
You get a sticker later because I know you.
Some form of shelter.
Shelter. Yes. Do not tip over. All right, we're fine. All right.
Bug spray.
Bug spray is helpful. I wouldn't consider it an essential. Anybody else?
Something you keep warm like a blanket?
Yes. We'll count that. That falls under shelter, but we'll put that in clothing too. So clothing. All right. You get a yes, outside?
A plan.
Plan. A plan. That is one of the most, if not, that's like your top essential right there.
Tell people when you're actually going out there.
Yes, that is my actual #1 rule. If you learn anything from this panel, tell someone you trust what your plan is, where you're going, how long you're going to be out there, when you plan to be back. That is one of your biggest safety nets. Because, I mean, if you're like in Chicago, you can always like walk down the street if you're lost and find something in some way out. If you're in the middle of the woods and you don't know where you're going, you need someone to know that you're there. So that is my biggest #1 takeaway is please tell someone where you're going and make a plan and share it with them. Any other essentials? We have 10 available.
My thoughts was like a phone or a compass.
Yes, navigation. Not gonna spell that out. All right. Anybody else? 10 essentials of camping. What do you think we need to bring?
Something to start a fire?
Yes, fire. All right, we got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, we got a few more. Outside.
First aid.
First aid, yes. And we'll go over what is somewhat recommended that you bring. All right, so my other ones, I'll just go real quick through that. Is some sort of multi-tool or knife, a source of light, so like a headlamp, flashlight, etc. Not just your phone flashlight, because you're going to need your phone maybe for navigation. Sun protection. And that should be all 10. Yes. All right. So, one of the first things Water. Now, some places that you go camping, especially if you're just starting out, a good way to start is to find a local campground. KOAs exist, national parks exist. They're going to have camping sites that oftentimes they have electricity, they have water. And you don't have to worry about finding your own or sanitizing your own water, because contrary to popular belief, unlike the animals that are our characters, we cannot drink straight out of mountain streams. That's a good way to get sick really quickly. So there's very easy ways to take care of that. You can boil it. You can bring filtration systems. They have tablets. But oftentimes, if you're just starting out, I highly recommend going to a campsite that has potable water, because that's water that you can drink, and you don't got to worry about it. There, one, checked off. Now, food. Food is also, we're thinking about this all the time. Now, if you're at a campground, a good way to fun, or might be camping in here, I guess, we're losing electricity. Food, you're going to have to find a way to cook the food if you don't bring stuff that you can't cook. If you're car camping, which works at a campground, you can pack a cooler. A lot of us pack a cooler at cons. It's similar to packing for cons, packing food for camping, as long as you're not backpacking it in. If you're packing it in, things are a bit different. It's easier to just bring extra water or have a way to do water, and then get dehydrated food. So with that, you'll need a way to cook it. And some places won't let you start campfires. There are fire dangers. And if you're in national parks, they have certain areas they want you to build campfires. So a good way to work around that is to have some sort of camping stove. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. They don't have to be that big. This one is mine. It's this big.
Tiny.
Sits on top of a little can of gas. You just screw it in. And all of these come up and hold your little pot right on top. And then you put the water, rehydrate your food, and you save a lot of weight, and you make sure that nothing's going to go bad. Because unfortunately, if you're backpacking your stuff out, you don't want to be packing out ice packs, etc. You can't exactly have sushi out on trail. I don't recommend it, even if you catch and make your own.
Bears really like fish. You cannot fight a bear no matter how strong you think you are.
Exactly. Speaking of bears, you know what else likes food? Every other living creature out there wants your food. Human food is the best thing that an animal thinks that it can get. So, and I know we're not in bear country technically here, or further south, you're not in bear country. You know what you are in? Raccoons, possums, mice, all the little, trash bandits that will come and will chew straight through all of your containers, your tent, your backpack, and come and eat your food. I have dealt with them. They are not fun. So we always recommend to hang up your food or have it in a bear can. Bear cans are these little plastic containers about this big that are almost as equally difficult for a bear to get into as a person to get into. There's actually strong overlap between the smartest of bears and the people who have the hardest time opening bear cans. So a very good way to protect your food, we call it the Bermuda Triangle. And it's where you'll have your sleeping area, so your tent goes there. And then you'll want to have a 100-yard distance between that and then where you're hanging up your food. So we'll put a little tree there. As opposed to most of the furries in the fandom, I cannot draw. So please use your imagination.
I feel you.
This is a bear cache. Then you want another 100 yards to where your cook site is. So your little campfire. That's fire.
It's better than I can draw.
So that's a fire. So the idea is here, they're not going to bother you. They're not going to try to get in your tent. If you lose some of your food or if it gets scratched up and whatnot, or mouse gets into it, that's much better than you finding it in your sleeping bag in the middle of the night. A lot of different ways you can bear hang. You can get a piece of rope. They have bags. You could also use a bear can. If you have a bear can, you just got to sit on the ground. Once it's in there, you don't have to worry about it. Most creatures aren't going to be able to get into that. And the reason you want to separate your cooking and your hanging of the food is because there's going to be a lot more spillover and eating here of fresh food, and that helps sort of make it so that they're not, they have a harder time figuring out where to get the food at. So like here, if you have marshmallows, you're going to want to break off the tip of your marshmallow stick and throw it in the fire. I don't know if any of you have been woken up at 3 in the morning by a raccoon choking on a piece of stick covered in marshmallow. It sounds horrifying and like The Grudge. So yeah, this is the Bermuda Triangle. Now I have handouts that you guys can take a picture of. You guys can pick up later once we're done. But, and that's included on there by someone who, again, draws much better than I do. Yeah, so dehydrated food is going to be one of your biggest allies here because you can pack a lot more water and you don't have to worry about keeping it as fresh. Shelter. There are about as many shelter options as you can possibly think of. I brought a couple today. We have a tent here. This is what we would call a semi-freestanding tent. So there's all different kinds of tents. You'll have ones that have these poles, like your Coleman tents, the ones that are easy setup. That's great if you're just getting into it and you're not quite sure. I don't know how I'm feeling about all of this camping stuff. I don't want to shell out all the money for it. I don't blame you. There are a lot of really good opportunities to find stuff that will be in budget. So REI, for example, if you're a member, then they have a rental program. It's like $5 a day to rent a tent or some other gear. Really, really affordable. So this doesn't have to be a cost. This doesn't have to be a costly hobby. It can be as expensive or as inexpensive as you want to make it. Tents are the same way. You can have a Coleman tent. They're great to start out with. They have like these darkrooms ones, so you don't have to worry about the sun beating down on you. Very nice for when you stayed up too late the night before at the campfire, had a little too much fun. You have a semi-freestanding one that's like this. So you have to stake out little bits of it, which I did with the chairs because I can't put stakes in the floor. And a rule of thumb for this is supposed to be a 2-person tent. I really hope you're good friends with whoever you're sharing your tent with. Because you will be closer than you ever thought possible. So if you want to share with someone, I would recommend adding an extra person to your tent count. So if you're a couple, get a 3-person tent. You will be a whole lot happier and your relationship will be saved. As far as other ones, you can have a tarp setup. A tarp setup is similar to a tent, except for it's usually a tarp over another tarp or just like some plastic on the ground. And pros, super lightweight, generally quick pack and easy setup once you get used to it. Cons, can be difficult to set up if you're like camping in the desert. You can't exactly fly off to a cactus. It doesn't work out that well.
Hurts.
Oh, sorry. Anybody have questions? Any questions?
I think she said it hurts.
Yes. But it saves a whole lot of weight if you are backpacking. Because considering if you're backpacking and doing like 10 days at a time, like through hiking, for example, you're hiking hundreds of miles, a lot of people will try to cut that base weight down. But there's, you got to balance it out. So a tarp setup is an example. I don't have one of those. They would drive me nuts. So that's why I have this tent. Another version, which
is that?
This is a semi-freestanding tent. It's a 2-person. I picked it up from REI a few years ago.
I was wondering about school more specifically because I got this, I think it's a 3 or 4-person tent, and it's bigger than I actually want because I'm not camping with people, I'm camping with myself and my dog.
Then I would definitely go with a 2-person tent. A 2-person's good for you and your dog unless you have an Irish Wolfhound. Then that's like a whole other person. 2-person tents are also the sweet spot for 1 person. Now there's baby setups and like other things where it's like real small, really easy to set up and lightweight. But again, you want space to put your stuff in. Oftentimes you don't want to have your stuff staying outside your tent what if it rains on it. Not a good time. So I always recommend having an extra person. Another setup, like I have here, is a hammock setup. If you don't like the ground, if you don't like bugs, if you camp where there's a lot of trees, a hammock is an excellent way to handle that. This is actually what I tend to use the most. I have a hammock set up. I have a tarp that goes over it. And it's very versatile. in my opinion. Also super lightweight. I think this thing weighs less than a pound. With all the straps and stuff. I just can't hang it up in here. It is what it is. All this to say, there's options. You have so many things to explore. And maybe you don't like being outside camping. Maybe your thing is like renting a cabin. Again, back to the KOAs. There's so many options now where you can get you can take baby steps in the outdoors. So you don't have to jump into it all at once. But one of your biggest things on our takeaway, on our 10 most important things to have, is shelter. Make sure before you go out, you set it up. You use it. Because if you get out on trail and you don't know how to use it at all, you're going to be in for a little bit of a not as fun time. And you want to go into your first time camping, your first few times camping, with as much enthusiasm and reach for success as possible. So that's shelter. Obviously, you're going to need something to sleep on. Everyone knows about sleeping bags. Super great, but what you don't always think about is there needs to be something between you and the tent bottom, because the ground will eat all of your heat and you will freeze, and it is not a good time. So, air mattresses are nice. They're inexpensive. You got to find a way to inflate them, but there's different variants. There's thin ones. There's also those foam pads, the blue ones that you see at Walmart. Those work in a pinch. You always just want something between you and the ground, just to insulate and make sure you have a better night's sleep.
So don't put the sleeping bag directly on the tent.
Correct. You never want to put the sleeping bag directly on the tent floor, because then you're pretty much on the ground. And I don't know if you've ever laid on the ground for a long time. You don't ever stay warm. The ground just leaches all your heat away, unless you're in the desert. Like I said, you can get a $7 air mattress and just inflate it with a battery operated pump. There you go. You have something. Even a space blanket will work in a pinch, like one of those reflective ones, because it's something reflecting your heat back up at you. If you do get into a pinch and you have to stay out overnight, I always have a little 99-cent space blanket in my gear. It takes up no room, super easy to have, and it's very useful, even if you can't fold it up after you use it. They tend to disintegrate after one use. But always have something. I didn't bring mine because I can only pack so much into my car. But they come in all these different sizes. Look for an R value. So an R value tells you kind of what that warmth is rated to, what seasons you can use it in. And pairing that with a good sleeping bag will help you out a whole lot. Now, if you hate...
Higher R value better or lower?
Higher R value is warmer, not necessarily better. It depends on what you want. So a moderate R value is about 2.5. And wherever you're getting your gear from, see if they have that on the website. Sometimes if you get Walmart gear, it won't always say. It'll say rated to 50 degrees to live. You will live at 50 degrees with that sleeping bag. Will you be comfortable? No. You will be shivering and teeth chattering if it gets down to 50 degrees and you won't like it. But it will keep you alive. That's something very important to keep in mind is check if it's a comfort rating on a sleeping bag or a life or a survival rating. Because a lot of the inexpensive bags are going to be, you will survive at this temperature, you won't like it, but you will live. Tangent. Yeah. So sleeping bags are great. You can also bring blankets. If you hate being trapped in a sleeping bag, especially mummy bags, which is me, I toss and turn all night, I'm just not still. There's also quilts, which is an option. Now, those are not as common to find, but it's something to look into. It's basically a big fluffy quilt that's made out of sleeping bag material, and the idea is since you're laying on the ground anyways, the loft of a sleeping bag is what's keeping you warm. So if you compress it, it's not going to keep you as warm as something that's fluffed up a whole lot. So the idea is since you're laying on the ground, you don't need a whole lot of fluff under you. So you just want a quilt, and that'll save you weight and let you move around a whole lot if you are a restless sleeper. So that's a little bit about sleeping bags, quilts, systems. Anybody have any questions, comments about that section?
Camping places? How to find?
Yes. So a great way to start is there's going to be KOAs. It's just KOA is a group of campsites, you're going to often see campers and like RVs at them, but they do have some with tent sites, and some of those will be like concrete pads, and that's a place to begin. If you want to go a little bit further and like pack into a campsite, a lot of your national parks will have resources depending on what state you're in. So, for example, in Illinois, there is the Shawnee National Park, and you can, in certain areas, you can primitive camp in it. So you can just hike into the woods and be like, here's a good spot, and put your stuff down and camp right there. Now, this depends on park to park and state to state, so you'll want to check on each park's individual website. A good way is like, best parks to camp in my state, and go through there. Another good way to start is to go hiking first and sort of figure out what area you're in. Do they have campsites? Do they know places where you can camp? Do they do primitive camping like in the Shawnee National Forest? You're also going to have places, like I said, so like Devil's Lake in Wisconsin is a state park, and they have individual sites that you pay per night for, but they have ones that are for tents. They have ones that are for campers. So that's another way to start, because you can start using your gear, but you're still in civilization enough that it's not scary. And they also, that park in particular, has working bathrooms, which, if you're primitive camping, you don't get. So, another thing to keep in mind, if you have to have a bathroom and running water, sticking with an established campsite that has those things is going to be your best route.
Packing water for a day or two straight. How do?
So if you are doing a day or two trip, I think, well, that also includes, are you rehydrating your food, or are you bringing food that doesn't need water to cook? Because then you have to add your water and change your water in. Now, a good way to go about this is bringing a water filter. If you go to a place that has water sources, like creeks, lakes, that sort of thing. There are several different filters. You have like the Sawyer Squeeze, which fits onto smart water bottles, actually. So you can just screw that on the top, fill the bottle with dirty water, and drink out of the filter, and that'll clean it up, so it makes your life a whole lot easier. You can boil stuff. That's good for long distance stuff. If you're packing it out and just want to bring all the water and not have to worry about it, it's like, I would do like maybe 3 to 4 liters per person per day at minimum. But also, the more you go hiking and camping, and the more you listen to your body, the more you'll know what you need to bring. We pack our fears, and so sometimes we'll pack more water than we need, but it's always better to have a little bit too much than not enough. Which is also why it's a good idea to bring a filter in case you're in an area that does have water sources available. Which also reiterates, please, never ever drink straight out of a stream. Ever. It's not clean. No matter how clean it looks, it's not. And there's microbes and stuff in it that, it'll make you sick, and that'll ruin your time. And you don't want to spend half of your camping trip sick as a dog.
The water is an ecology. The water is its own ecology.
It is. It is. And it has all sorts of fun things like Giardia and other stomach bugs that are really not fun to deal with. So, we were talking about primitive camping, how you find a place to camp. So, I have handouts on that, on how to find a good spot to put your tent. So let's say I come to this clearing. Oh, there's a creek running down this way. I'm going to go put my tent next to the creek. That is not what you want to do at all. Just because, as beautiful as it is, as nice as that water sounds, one, that puts a lot of damage on that area. And we want to try to keep the nature places that we go in as nice as possible. They're not our homes, they're the animals, and we want to keep them from looking like, the side of the street. 2, that's also the animal's water source. So you will have animals in through your campsite all the time, which sounds really cool until you're woken up at like 3 in the morning by a raccoon who's on his way to get a drink and smells your food.
Will bear bags prevent raccoons from getting into them if you hang them, or are those not raccoons?
I always recommend hanging your food or putting it in a bear canister. So they have these big, heavy PVC plastic containers that are really good at keeping bears out for the most part. Otherwise, I would get like one of those water-resistant dry bags, because they tend to be sturdier. And you pack your food in it, and you loop it up over a sturdy tree branch, and you tie it down. That will, as long as you keep it, I would say, like 3 feet or more away from the trunk of the tree, and have it a couple feet down from the branch, that should keep most of the raccoons and stuff out of it. You never want to leave a bag on the ground because the mice will chew into it. The mice generally can't get into bear canisters. But the downside, bear cans are about 2 to 3 pounds each, empty. So if you're hiking in with one of those, and there are some areas in the Northwest where it's required to have a bear can. You can't use, they even have these things called earth sacks. You can't use those out there, so you have to have a can. So it might be a good investment if you're going to be camping out there more often. As far as picking a tent site, though, goes, we want to stick to that Bermuda Triangle, keeping 100 yards between where we hang our food, where we cook our food, and where we're sleeping. Now, another thing to keep in mind is toothpaste smells good. Deodorant smells great. Anything that has like a smell that we like, they will like. Your toothbrush even needs to go in your bear bag, because otherwise you might have a raccoon who wants to brush his teeth, and that's disgusting.
Not for them.
Not for them, but for us, for sure. Plus then, how do they get in your tent? Because they don't generally use the zippers. So then you have to repair your tent, and that's not fun. Oh yeah, we were talking about picking out a tent spot. So, all right, so we know we can't go by this creek down here. I'm gonna actually draw this. So I can have a map, because while I can see it in my head, that does not mean that you guys can.
I can't visualize a cube.
All right. So we have our stream here. We have, let's see, we're going to put some woods here. They look kind of dry, burnt out. So these are the burnt woods. This is a meadow, so
I imagine
we
using
love the
tarps
grass.
would probably be better if you're camping around where there's not a lot of clear ground space.
What was that?
Would tarps be better if you're camping where there's not a lot of clear ground space, if you want to camp on the ground versus a hammock?
The thing is with a tarp is if you don't carry something to suspend it from, you're going to need trees or trekking poles to hold your tarp up above you.
No, I mean if you're trekking in a wooded area. If you're in a wooded area where there's not much flat ground, to put something like this.
Yes, then a hammock would tend to work a whole lot better. Or if the ground is wet and mushy. So, yeah.
Comment about the hammock. Like, I have been hammock camping since I was like 14. I hailed from the southeast, like right smack dab middle of Tennessee.
Yep.
If you have trees to support it, hammocking is wonderful.
Yes. But that's the thing.
Impact. It's easy to pack down. It's lighter than a tent.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's super great. Hammocks are great if you, first of all, it's knowing where you're going camping. If you're camping in the prairies, you can't use a hammock. It's not going to work out very well for you. A
I'm
tent's
just
going
trying
to
to
be used.
imagine fitting my dog in there.
Some people do. And some hammocks come without bug nets. So this one is a bit of a leveled up one. That bug net zips off. And some people do use hammocks. The concern for having your dog in it, how big is your dog? Yeah, so that probably wouldn't work out. Just because if they don't feel supported, sometimes it weirds them out. You know how dogs are. So I would probably more recommend if you have your dog with you, oh, there's your dog. I did not.
Yeah, that's why I was pointing and she's right here on the floor.
She's so quiet. I didn't even see her.
Yeah. Just kind of disappears if she's facing you directly. She's so narrow. Just
So
look at her wrong way, there's no
with
one
her being that size, that might work. You can get a double hammock. which is just wider.
Okay.
That says it can support 2 people. Again, I really hope you're close to that person. Because it will feel every toss, turn, and move, similar to having 2 people in a 2-person tent. So if she is pretty much...
She's only 20 inches at the shoulder.
Yeah, then that might work. Again, she will either need to lay next to you or on top of you. And the only concern I would have would be claws. Because the claws can mar up a hammock bottom, and you don't want her to accidentally claw open a hole enough to just drop through.
Also the newborn problem. You might roll on top of it.
Yes, and you might roll on top of your dog if you move it
If
all
I
in your
come
sleep.
anywhere close in the middle of the night and trying to put my butt where she is, she sure as heck lets me know. There is no putting my butt on my dog in the middle of the night because she will yell at me.
So there you go. You might want to, if you want to try it, I would also bring a tent and a tent setup. And then that way, if something is to happen, if it's not working, then you can move. Then you have a escape plan if the hammock is not going okay. Also, I would practice at home first to get her used to, because the motion, when you first get into it, it rocks. And it can be a little weird, and also just like it wraps around you a little bit, which is very nice. But again, dogs might be a little weirded out with it. Which also reminds me, remember when I said that you need something between you and the ground to keep you warm? Same goes for a hammock, except for it's slightly a little bit different. So when you're pressed in here, your back's up against here, that breeze comes through, and it's just like laying on the ground. And it'll suck all the heat out of you, which is great on a hot summer day, but if you're trying to sleep at night and it's 50 degrees, that's not cool. So I would either you can put a foam mat in there to insulate you, or they make things called under quilts, which is just what it sounds. It's a quilt-like material. It goes on the outside of your quilt, or on the outside of your hammock, and then as long as it's not pushed up against you, it helps insulate. So, but that's a little bit, that gets into more complicated camping stuff. If we want to go further into hammocks, I'm glad to, though. I've been hammock camping for quite a while now. I have an under quilt. Like I said, it's one of my ideal ways to camp. I only recently picked up a tent again. Oh yeah, we were setting up our campsite. So we're using a tent. So we can't go by the water because 1, animals, 2, we want to preserve the area, and 3, it could rain upstream. And even if there's not a cloud in the sky, there's no rain on the forecast, that water comes from a long way away, and it can flood really, really quickly. So you want to be at least, 200 feet away from any body of water like that, because that water can and will rise faster than you think, and it will be at the most inconvenient time possible, no matter what time you think, no matter what, it's always inconvenient. And that's not safe. You don't want all your stuff to get soaking wet. So you need to be 200 yards away. All right. Where do you think we should go? For their tent.
You said that too fast.
Where do you want to go with our tent? We're 200 yards away. So we have some woods down here, some burnt forest up here from an old forest fire.
Probably put the fire closer to the river. No?
So we're trying to figure out where our tent is. So this is just old burned woods. We have a meadow and some fresh woods.
I was gonna say a little closer to the burnt woods.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, if there's a burnt woods, what if the other one catches on fire? I don't know.
That's fair.
Also, maybe your campfire would be a little less likely to.
True.
My thoughts were smack dab in the middle of the meadow.
Okay. So right here.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have an option for here and an option for here. Now, there's going to be some pros and cons to these. So, one pro that's here is if this forest is burnt here, that means all the grass is likely to be low, so you don't have to worry about ticks, bugs, or grass up to your hip or whatever. The con, and something you should always look for when you're setting up your hammock, your tent, or whatever, is look up. That's one thing that people do the least, is look up where they're walking. because that forest is burnt. How many dead branches are above you? It does not take a very large branch to fall down and cause you a bad day.
How many of the burnt trees can still hold a hammock?
Yes. Well, the burnt trees you don't want to hang a hammock off of because you don't know how burnt out they are.
It's also
We're
not
we're just trying to do a tent right now, but even still, if you can look around and see that the trees are far enough away from you, like I would say probably at least as tall as the tree is, think about how far that would lay down if they're burnt, and then separate yourself from that tree that far. If you don't have that space, come out of the trees. Camp out here. This is pretty good. This is a good area. The only issue with camping out here is that the wind doesn't have anything to block it. So there are ways to counteract that. You're going to want to put your tent door away from the wind so it's not blowing into your tent whenever you're trying to get in and out. And you always want to make sure that your head, where your head is going to be in the tent, is upslope. So that means that there's even the slightest bit of hill, figure out where it is, and then put your head upslope of it if you can't find a very flat horizontal area. So here would be the easiest, if not the windiest, but it'd be a good spot. Trees down here, also a good spot. Again, just look up for trees that are fallen over, leaning, dead branches. I've camped under trees all the time. It just takes a little bit extra couple minutes to look up and make sure you don't have to worry about anything above you. Now, if you're in a campground that is well maintained, like where campers are, like trailers are, that's not nearly as big of a worry. In fact, a lot of times you're camping on a lawn. Another thing is the stars are cool. Stars are great. It's awesome to be able to look up into the sky at night, especially if you're in an area without a lot of light pollution. I highly recommend if you have never been to an area that is mostly free of light pollution, please go and go at night because it is the most incredible sight you will ever see. To be able to see the actual full Milky Way and so many stars you can't count. Being out here, even in the woods out around this area, doesn't even count. Some of those almost total darkness areas blow it out of the water. And it's incredible. Now, it can be cool to fall asleep with that above you. Keep in mind that if it suddenly rains at night, though, and you have to put on your rain fly or your tarp, it's not going to be fun. So a good way around that is to at least have it partially attached so that you can quickly deploy it at night, like, okay, it's raining. Because if your sleeping bag gets wet, then how are you going to sleep, especially if you're in a down sleeping bag? I always go with synthetic just because it's less expensive and it insulates when wet, like wool.
Easier to keep clean.
Easier to keep clean and generally easier to find. Down is great because it is much warmer than synthetic. It's lighter, so much lighter, and it can compress down into these teeny little balls. That means you have so much more room for other stuff like your books, I don't know, your chair, whatever else it is you want to bring. Snacks. Extra water. But there's a con with that. Obviously, if it gets wet, if down gets wet at all, it loses all those properties immediately. So you just have a sopping wet, useless sleeping bag and you're going to be cold. So something to keep in mind if you're looking into picking out a sleeping bag. So that is our tents. Shelter systems, I should say. Any questions?
Actually had a question. When you go over how to survive different animal attacks, if hypothetically you had to get into a fight for food.
So the things that you're going to deal with the most are probably going to be like raccoons, possums, that sort of thing. Generally, you don't want to be sneaking around the woods. You want to make noise so creatures know you're there. Most of the time, other animals will run in the opposite direction if they hear a person. People are scary. They generally don't want to be around them. Now, if you run into, let's say, a bear, a mountain lion, etc., don't run away. Don't run. Generally try to make yourself as big and as loud as possible and stand your ground for the most part. If it is a moose, I am sorry, there is not much you can do besides maybe try to hide.
I have been charged by a moose before.
Yes.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
It is terrifying, and
Yeah.
they just come out of nowhere. But
Yes.
like,
And they don't always do the elephant charge. Now elephant charges, they'll come towards you and then they'll fake charge you. Moose just hate everyone and everything always.
That's why Canadians are so humble. Their landlords are moose and they pay taxes to geese.
And it's just moose, you just have to be aware of where you're near a moose and just generally stay calm. Now you're going to interact with that more north. I don't have experience with moose, I just know kind of what to do and what to be around. You'll see black bears around here. They're generally easy. If you just be big and scary and loud, they're generally going to leave you alone. But also don't antagonize a bear.
I actually have a pretty helpful rhyme that I remember hearing when it comes to dealing with bears. If it's brown, get down. If it's black, fight back. If it's white like the president, you're about to be having sense.
Yep.
You can't deal with polar bears.
Yeah, you can't deal with polar bears, but also, unless you're in Alaska,
Yeah.
which I don't think any of us are going to Alaska anytime soon, that's not a big concern.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll run into coyotes or wild dogs. Generally, they'll still run away from you. Again, just be big, be loud. Some people carry bear spray. That is, if you're in grizzly bear country, that's often a requirement. It's like a big can of the nastiest pepper spray you can imagine. And it works. But otherwise, just be loud and big. Oh yeah, back to our 10 essentials since I erased all of them. Another thing you need to bring, navigation of some kind. GPS, great. There are little ones that are just GPS. Your phone will work, but make sure you have a way to charge it. They do make battery packs, but if you lose your charge on your phone, then there goes your GPS. So I always recommend having a map of the area you're in and a compass and knowing how to use it. REI presents a lot of navigational classes that you can take for inexpensive. There's so many things on YouTube. YouTube's a great, as long as you find a good source for navigation, that's a great avenue to take that's inexpensive. There are personal locator beacons like Garmin and Reach, but that gets into the expensive bit. Let's see, food, water, light. Always have a light source, even if you are just going out for a day hike. Sometimes things happen, and you'll want to, if it starts getting dark, you'll want to be able to see. And your phone flashlight, I do not count that. That's a secondary at best. Ways to make fire. You'll want to have a campfire, potentially. Make sure the area that you're in is allowed or only put it in approved fire rings.
Sharpen spark.
You'll want, there's flint and steel, there's stormproof matches, there's lighters. I like thick lighters. They're cheap, they're easy, and even if they get wet, you just set it out to dry for a day and it'll work again.
Sharpen spark's a little bitty doohickey that's actually got, it is a flint and steel.
Okay,
And
yeah,
also
you just
does
like
flint
click it.
Sharpener. No, actually, it's got, it's on the end is actually the flint.
Okay.
So it's actually inside, so it's compact, you can get it in keychain size.
There you go.
There's ones that even float, so if you drop it in water, it's not going to
That's pretty useful. Yeah, so there's another option if you like to play with flint and steel. Again, I would have more than one. Shelter, first aid. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen those pre-made first aid kits that are like, oh, this is good for 5 people, 4 people, whatever. They're useless. Only because if you don't know what is in them, exactly what you have, and you don't know how to use it, then it's not helpful to you. People will sometimes bring like suture kits and like gaping wound dressings and like gunshot stuff. Oh, my old military buddy brought this back when he left the service. If you don't have the training, that will be of no use to you. It's just dead weight that you're carrying. I built all my first aid kits myself. This is just a cheap military pouch I got online. just because it has lots of options to hold stuff. And it's just all, I got Band-Aids in here, there's an extra lighter, some ace wrap. I would plan more for illness and soreness and foot injuries than as much like career-ending injuries, if that makes sense. So you're going to want your Benadryl, ibuprofen, Motrin, Tylenol, Imodium, because that also dehydrates you if you have a bad BM day, which you can. I mean, if you're eating food you're not used to, Imodium is always in my pack. Super lightweight, really helpful. Neosporin. If you have any prescription medications, bring a couple extra days worth. Just in case. You might drop a pill in the water, and that would be a really annoying time. Band-Aids, ace wraps, moleskin. So if you're hiking a lot, you'll get blisters. And your feet are your most important, are one of your most important assets because they were getting you everywhere. So you're going to want to take care of them. On that note, do not tear open or pop your blisters. You're introducing infection. If you absolutely have to drain it, then like poke a tiny little hole in it and let it drain. But don't tear open your blisters, please. Any questions on first aid? Clarifications? Weird stories?
I do have a small story. I used to work out in the woods for an organization that we built trails. One of my friends had been doing it for like 7 or 8 years. They said, I'm prepared for literally everything. And then they accidentally dropped their stupid sharp knife and it cuts them open all the way down their calf. It's not a deep cut or anything, but like, just need some stuff to clean it up and put it back together until we get to the doctor. We opened his first aid kit, and something in here had gone from rubber or plastic material to goo. He just hadn't opened it since he had started working there 7 years ago. So everything in there was expired, covered in goo, and impossible to take because it was destroyed. So keep your first aid kits up to date, whether you buy them or make them. Check the dates on your shit. Keep a little card in there that says, hey, this expires now.
And another good thing is to keep a card in there and on you that says what you're allergic to.
Yes.
Your allergies.
Absolutely.
Your info.
Any of your pertinent medical information.
What medications you're on.
Like anything that could be a difference in life or death if you are passed out and someone is going through your medical kit.
Right. And yeah, keep up to date. That's why I build all my kits. I know some stuff in this most recent one is expired, but I'm currently in the process of rebuilding it. And that's good because I know what I'm doing. And I'm not using it for a couple months. It's very easy to just build it and then just forget that it exists until you're like, oh, I'll just bring it, it'll be fine. And then you run into where everything's melted together. I also highly recommend you take a basic first aid course. There's ones that'll be like a day, even a weekend. Get a CPR certification. Not only is it beneficial to you in everyday life, just knowing when to be more concerned and when not to panic, sometimes it's also pretty good on job apps, resumes. Helped me get to where I was when I actually had my wilderness first responder certification, which is a 90-hour course that I took. And that doesn't mean that I know better than an EMT. It just means I know
You are better prepared.
Yes. You can never be too prepared within reason.
Red Cross even has a PEP emergency first aid course that might be useful to protecting them.
Yeah, the only thing with that is I would look into what everything is and then talk to your vet to make sure that that lines up with what your vet recommends for your dog.
Yeah.
Just because some stuff in those kits are placebos at best. It just depends on what kit you pick.
I wasn't talking about kits, I was talking about classes for...
Classes, yes.
Because Red Cross also has classes on dog first.
That, highly recommend that. And if you can also talk to your vet and tell them, hey, I'm taking my dog on this big trip. What do you recommend for first aid stuff for me to bring with? Sometimes they can give you doggy Benadryl in case they have an allergic reaction. Dogs like to eat things, lick toads, eat mushrooms. It's their thing. And they can give you things of like what to watch out for if your dog gets sick. Again, with dogs, if they're not a service animal, make sure the area that you are in allows pets. Because especially in national parks and areas with bears, they have strict rules on what animals can and cannot be in a park. Unless, of course, it's a service animal. Let's see here. Sun protection. As we've seen by our lovely fursuit, pictures posted everywhere, what heat stroke are, heat exhaustion are. Burns are awful. I'm sure most of us in here have gotten sunburns. They will make your camping trip worse. Bring something to cover up with, be it sunscreen, a hat, a light long sleeve shirt. I wear pants pretty much all the time in the woods, bar none. That's just what I wear. It keeps the ticks off, it keeps the chiggers off, it keeps the mosquitoes out, it helps the briars, and it keeps the sun off. Because the sun will still come down from the trees and still burn you, and it is not a good day. As far as tools go, you don't necessarily need like a full toolkit, whatever. A simple Swiss Army knife is fantastic. You don't need a big Bowie knife. Unless you're doing bushcraft, which is different, then you know, if you're doing bushcraft, then you do your own research and you know what you need to bring. This holds most of the tools that anyone will ever need, unless you need a specialty tool for some part of your kit. They're inexpensive, they last forever. Make sure you have something to cut stuff with, and just a little bitty baby knife. Any questions? No? Okay. Clothing. If you remember anything from the clothing, cotton kills. If it gets wet, it is a bear to dry, it will suck all of your heat out, and it is a miserable time. Don't wear cotton in the woods. At least wear a blend of something with polyester or rayon or nylon, because that will dry out more easily and it will keep you safe. Cotton is great for every day. This is cotton. Obviously denim. Denim is cotton. Jeans are cotton and they will retain water. I don't know if any of you have worn wet jeans for a long time. It's miserable. It's even worse if you're in the woods picking up all the stuff and grit and stuff because your pants won't dry. A lot of us have synthetic clothing now. We don't always buy just cotton. So it's easy to look through your stuff and see like, okay, this is mostly not cotton. That would be helpful to bring out in the woods. Hey, I don't have any pants that aren't jeans. Run to the Goodwill. I'm sure you'll be able to find something that will work out. And make sure you always pack extra socks. Again, protect your feet. Always want to try to wear clean-ish socks. And otherwise, that's all in clothing. Anyone have any questions, anything they want me to dive further into? This is just sort of a basics kind of thing where I go off on tangents as well.
I came in a little closer to the middle of this.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already go over how to choose a hiking bag?
How to choose a hiking bag?
Yes.
No, that is a great topic. Okay, so my number one tip. Pick all of your other gear first. Get everything that you think you're going to want to have first, and then you can pick a bag based on that. If you pick a giant, 100-liter bag, you're going to fill it up. It doesn't matter, oh, I'm going to only pack this stuff. People see room in something and think that they can shove more stuff in there. In which case, then you will be carrying it, and it will hurt your back, and it will not be a good time.
How small does this tent pack down?
This actually packs down pretty small. Without the holes, this big around, that tall. I have a little compression disc over there. And the tent stakes, I just break it down. They're all about this long, and then I tuck it into a pocket. Actually, I can talk about picking one of these out while I break it down. So you could easily start with just a school backpack. If you're just going hiking, a school backpack is great. If you're going Car camping, you can store so much more in your car, and you don't have to worry about it. As far as hiking packs go, I would highly recommend something with an internal frame. Some of you might know what an Alice pack is, or like look at old pictures of movies and you see a big metal frame with a bag attached to it. That's an external frame. They don't hardly make those anymore, but that's what it used to be. It used to be a bag strapped to a harness, strapped to a frame, and then you wear it. This is an internal frame bag. It has a little thin aluminum frame inside that gives it a shape and support. And this has mesh on the back so that my back doesn't sweat thin. I would get something with hip belts, a hip belt, because then if you size it right and you cinch it right, all of the weight goes on your hips and not your shoulders and not your back. So it saves your back and shoulders, puts it better in your center of gravity, and is generally safer. If you want to get fitted for a pack, again, REI is a great place to go. They have tons of different packs and people who know how to fit them to you. This one I can adjust top to bottom. I can move all the stuff around. Packs are not one size fits all. And there are packs for different body types. It really just depends on what you want to do as far as size. I tend to go for ones that have a big dump pouch in the top, but then I can access it. So this has a big dump pouch in the top, and then it has some zippers on the side I can get into. So that helps me get into little pieces. I wouldn't go for something that is like extremely specialized, compartmentalized, because then there's no versatility. Then you have to really pick your items for the pack, when you should be picking your pack for what items you have. Your pack should be versatile and able to fit whatever you are throwing at it within reason. I like Osprey. They have a great warranty and they're solid packs. But you can also, I've used Alice packs have been used. You can find those at military outlets. Again, a school backpack can be used, but if you're doing heavy hiking, get something with an internal frame. If you want reviews on stuff, YouTube is a great place because a lot of times they won't sugarcoat it, especially if you find a YouTuber that doesn't get the pack for free. They'll buy it and then they'll tell you exactly why they hate it, which is very entertaining and super helpful. If you want a couple of YouTubers that I found super helpful, I can write them down over here as well. I'll have handouts you can take pictures of or carry with you. One is Homemade Wanderlust. That is actually a Triple Crown through hiker.
I love them.
She has hiked over probably 8,000 to 10,000 miles and done through hikes, which means she's hiked from Mexico to Canada more than 3 times. And that's, well, each of those hikes was between like 1,700 to 2,500 miles. So that's going to be your lightweight stuff. You want something that is going to be, and she has a whole lot of really helpful things. Miranda in the Wild, also a great resource. She works for REI and is on the REI YouTube channel. Super helpful. There's also Darwin on the Trail. I can also write all these down. They're a great resource. I like REI's website for the reviews. They're super helpful to figure out what you want. You never have to buy from them. I'm not trying to be an REI shill, but they usually have all of the specifications and all of the information on items that you want. Any other questions? Concerns? Comments? Anything at all, even if it's only vaguely pertains to camping?
What do you do to keep the mosquitoes and bugs away? Besides not having,
I wear long pants usually, and sometimes I'll wear a long sleeve t-shirt. I will occasionally carry bug spray. I don't tend to use DEET because it's not great for the environment and it's not great for me. I use Picardin or permethrin. They're both a similar chemical. One you can use to treat your clothes, and one you can use on your skin. And there's like one called Tick Defense that's like Repel. I use that a lot.
I also heard that if you especially don't want to have to deal with like mosquitoes, that burning herbs such as like mint is a good way to deter them because the smell is toxic to them, but hey,
Right.
good smell to you.
Citronella works. They do have some small ones that you can carry with you. There are little packs that you can put on your belt that have a fan,
Oh, it's okay.
and it'll blow bug spray kind of around you. There's a variety. I've never found anything that works perfectly. I will also usually put my pants inside my boots because ticks are a nightmare. I cannot stress enough that keeping ticks off of you is one of the best ways to stay healthy because they do carry a disease. That does not mean be scared of them. They're super easy to combat if you just take the precautions. It's like anything. It's like don't be scared of cars. Questions? Anything else you
There's
want
probably
to know?
something you want in your kit.
Yeah, I got used to them real quick. Yep.
Do you have any bad experiences in the woods?
Let's see here.
Just like times where you weren't prepared or times where you just got caught in something that you couldn't have planned for?
Let's see. Sure, we can have the time that the trail ride that I was on, we packed all our stuff up on horses, and we were going through the woods, and we ran over some ground bees, which are like hornets but in the ground, and they caused a stampede.
Where'd you go to do that?
So that was a summer camp when I was a kid. Yeah, you have to.
Do they have an adult version?
No, unfortunately. I wish they did because I would be on it.
Horses and camping? I like both of them.
Yes.
Same.
So that one was a little bit rough. We had people fall off, get injured. But my best thing in that situation was to try to stay calm and then keep everything else calm. It's all about your attitude. If you run into a situation like that where everything is going wrong, your stuff is soaking wet because you didn't look at the weather or whatever, don't look at what's going wrong. Look at what you can do to fix it. You're soaking wet anyway. You fell off your horse anyway.
Signed up.
You can't sit around and mope about it. You have to be proactive about it. So that would be one of the biggest ones. I have ones where I didn't pack enough warm clothing and enough warm sleeping bags, and I was freezing my absolute tail off. Luckily, with that situation, I was with friends, and my friends were able to cover my butt and provide me with more warm gear. So there was that. Now, since the panel's just about over, and we're running out of time, I do work with Smokey the Bear. I have stickers and Dare Beaters that have Smokey stuff on them, so if you guys want one,
Dropped one.
I have like 100. So if anybody wants a sticker or whatever, come on up, say hi. Or not, I'll just throw it at you. I understand that socialization is miserable. Well, I can throw you this, but I can't throw you a sticker. It won't work. Sorry. So they're on this chair, and I'll keep packing stuff up. If you want to come up and ask more questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, great. I have my handouts here. You can take a picture of them. Yeah, this is the Keshma 48. It's a 48 liter. You want weird fun stories? Go for it. This is my first time running a panel, so feedback is also accepted.
This one dragged me out to Wildcat Mountain.
Silver Gatoman, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gatoman, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gatoman, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.